to actually read a poem out loud is a very physical experience.
This is poet Pat Edwards. She works at the Poetry Pharmacy, a bookstore that offers poetry as an alternative therapy in Shropshire.
Good poetry is naturally written thinking of the voice and of how we need to take a breath, just the holding yourself in a particular way. I don't think you can slouch when you're reading poetry. I think you almost physically sit up. And because you're reading the poetry out loud, I think you need to give your lungs space to fill with air.
That's the really important bit, giving your lungs space to fill with air. Some long-COVID patients like myself develop irregular breathing patterns. What that means is, the virus gave my body a bad habit which makes me breathe really fast and shallow. The way to break this is to practice breathing with my diaphragm and hold my breath for longer. So, reteach my body how to breathe and expand my lungs' capacity to hold air. It might seem fairly simple, but it feels like trying to blow up a balloon that has a tiny hole in it. Here's me trying to do my breathing physiotherapy at the start of this experiment. I feel like I can't do it. I just can't. How do you change where the air goes when you breathe in? It's an unnatural sensation to override your body's automatic rhythm. But that's where I'm hoping poetry will come in.
Reading, speaking, they're all just natural things to do. You don't have to be taught how to do them. Poetry's an informal way of almost accidentally training your body to do the right things in terms of breath. Sitting up, inhaling and exhaling, holding breaths for a little bit longer perhaps.
So that's what I'm going to do for the next month. Combine my daily breathing exercise with reading poetry out loud. I'm a bit skeptical, but I'm hopeful. هر نفسی که فرو می رود ممد حیات است و چون بر می آید مفرح ذات. پس در هر نفسی دو نعمت موجود است و بر هر نعمتی شکری واجب.
Sometimes it almost makes you gasp when you read something, or you feel it right in your sternum, what somebody has said. It hits home. It hits home.
When I read this Persian poem a few months back, it really did hit me in my sternum. Translated it goes, every breath that is inhaled is a lengthening of life. And when it is exhaled, it brings joy to the soul. Thus, in every breath there are two blessings, and for each one, thanks is due. These are the opening lines to the 13th century epic work made up of 595 short poems, the Gulistan by Saadi Shirazi.
Gulistan literally means flower garden. The Istan is
Muhammad Ali, an expert and translator of classical Persian poetry.
And Gul means flower, so it means the land of flowers.
He explained that the idea of breath in these lines is likely referring to a mystical concept belonging to a Central Asian Islamic group called the Naqshbandiya, popular in Saadi's time and still today.
The Naqshbandi Hush Dar Dam is one of their 12 principles. Hush Dar Dam means something like presence in every breath. But this is just an ever-present theme, even if it's not expressed so explicitly as in the Naqshbandi principles. You see it in yoga and in Buddhists and in Hindus, and every single kind of spiritual tradition develops this idea that you should be conscious of every breath. It's not just the simple idea of you hold your breath and then you breathe out. It feels great. You feel a relief. It's something deeper, something about your essence. It brings joy to your core. So just being alive creates some sort of spiritual change. If you're breathing with intention, that every breath will create some sort of spiritual tahavul, as we would say, some sort of alteration in your state.
The lines of poetry that I read yesterday have been ringing in my head ever since. ابر و باد و مه و خورشید و فلک در کارند Tornani Nikafarinyo Nakaflat Nachori. The clouds, wind, moon, sun, and all the bodies of the heavens are at work, so that you may have your bread and not eat it heedlessly. My dad worked at a carpentry workshop when he was a teenager. And growing up, he always told us whenever we bought new furniture that wood breathes. I never quite understood this until now, when I'm sat at my wooden desk and I'm trying to be conscious that whatever air I inhale has probably permeated this wood, and whatever I exhale will go back into it. That's the second layer of Hushtardam that I realized today. That in breathing consciously, we do somehow synchronize with the living beings around us. Trying to be aware of this as I breathe today has actually comforted me. In the more adventurous Naqshbandi circles, awareness of this exchange of breath with the natural world speaks to a larger truth, that the physical boundaries of living forms are only imagined, that really everything is everything because a single current of breath unifies us. The air I inhale that another being has exhaled becomes part of me as it moves through my body and vice versa. It's a bit trippy when you think about it for too long, but luckily my 3 minutes of breathing practice for today are over.
Without it sounding silly that, oh, we're talking poetry. They're just words, but they're very special words. When you're given a diagnosis, obviously there's this existential threat. You'll often hear people say that they suddenly become very aware of everything around them. The sky is bluer, the rain is wetter. There's an intensity to everything. In 2014, I was diagnosed with bowel cancer. And I think I became acutely aware of the intensity of how amazing the world was around me. Every day, there's some poetry every single day. Just poetry, poetry, I love it.
A couple weeks into this experiment, however, I was feeling less optimistic. It's 6 p.m. and I haven't done any breathing exercises or poetry today. I've been short of breath all day and I feel ridiculous in my room alone, reading poetry aloud as though it's some medieval magical incantation that's going to somehow fix my lungs, and it just feels so... I needed to find out if there was any scientific basis to what I was doing.
Well, hello.
I thought I'd be more nervous than you.
Nick Canty, academic at the Department of Information Studies, UCL.
I drew a Persian poem to help me fix my breathing pattern. Did you think I was crazy?
No, I thought there's something here. Absolutely. Bibliotherapy is a relatively new term. I don't think anything new has been invented at all here. What we're doing is returning to a good idea that's always been there.
So is there some science behind it?
It's a very good question. Is it science or is it art? I'll talk about an experiment. People were asked to read a chapter and the next day they had MRI scans conducted and they could see developments in their brain.
It's really exciting as well that you can actually see what's happening in someone's brain before and after they've been reading a chapter a day.
So the opportunity is to do more of that work.
Which seems much more hard science.
This is far more hard science. And there's been work done around clinical settings where people have been prescribed books to read and they complete a form afterwards and say how they're feeling at the end of it. So I don't think we should get carried away, but telling stories, hearing stories is part of the human condition.
Despite briefly losing faith in this experiment, I've been reciting poetry for a few weeks, and today I realized something remarkable. I've actually extended how long I can hold my breath. So I noticed when I hold my breath in my physio exercises, for some reason I can't do it for nearly as long as when I recite poetry. Now, I'm nowhere near cured, but I never expected reading poetry to actually have a physical impact.
I feel I've moved from forcing myself to interrupt my body's rhythm to using Hushtardam to gently try to tap into a universal rhythm that's bigger than me. It's just a change in perspective, but it's so much easier to be in your body when you're not fighting it. Again, I'm nowhere near completely cured, but I'm excited about where this could get me in 6 months or a year even. 900 years ago, Saadi expressed exactly what I'm hopeful for when he wrote, غم موجود و پریشانی مردم ندارم نفسی میزنم آسوده و عمری میگذارم. Grief for the present or distress for the past does not trouble me. I draw my breath in comfort and thus spend my life.
Breathing Lyrical was produced by Taqwa Sadiq, a student at University College London and one of the winners of the 2022 Charles Parker Prize. New Storytellers is a Soundscape production for BBC Radio 4.
Sarah Parker. And tomorrow we'll have another Charles Parker Prize winning entry from 2022, Down on the Farm, produced by the University of Sunderland graduate Megan Hayward. That's at the same time of 9:45. And a little later on tomorrow morning we'll be turning the clock back to the 1980s and an iconic dystopian sci-fi blockbuster to explore its legacy and how it shaped our views on artificial intelligence. I'll be back. 40 Years of the Terminator is tomorrow morning at 11:30. And in fact, Hollywood comes to Women's Hour next today on Radio 4. Anne Hathaway and Jessica Chastain are on the programme just after the news.
Welcome to Cafe Hope, where the conversation is always uplifting.
So, okay, what he's doing, okay, there's some rubbish here, I guess I'll start clearing that up.
I really appreciate all the hard work that you and the team have done.
My product is not bike, it's a bloke that doesn't go back to prison. Its purpose is to break the cycle of reoffending.
It's been a good support network for me, so they've really helped me.
A brand new series meeting the people transforming the lives of those around them.
The main thing in it all is getting them out and getting them mixing, and what that does for your well-being, for your mental health. It's really changed my life.
Cafe Hope with me, Rachel Burden, starts on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds next Monday morning at 9:45.
BBC News at 10 o'clock. The Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, is to update MPs today on the cyber threat from China. A number of MPs and peers who've been critical of Beijing are thought to have been targeted. They were briefed by the head of parliamentary security. Our political editor Chris Mason says ministers are particularly concerned about China's influence on the UK's electoral process.
There will be an explicit acknowledgement today of the role of Chinese hackers getting into the Electoral Commission's data and details. In other words, our details, the details of millions of people. We knew it had happened. What is new today is the government will explicitly say that China was to blame for it.
Russian authorities say more than 90 people are still in hospital following Friday's deadly attack on a concert venue near Moscow. At least 137 people. After pupils were shown a cartoon of Prophet Muhammad. A deadline expires later today for Donald Trump. Huge fine imposed on him by a judge who found he'd overstated the value of his assets. If he fails to pay, the process of seizing his properties can begin. Scientists at Europe's Centre for Particle Research, CERN, have approved a £100 million experiment that could prove the existence of particles that haven't yet been found. Finding so-called ghost particles could help researchers to explain how the universe evolved. BBC News. On Front Row this evening, the renowned American poet Nikki Giovanni will be talking about the new career-spanning collection of her works published earlier this month, covering 1968 to the present day. Front Row with Tom Sutcliffe is at 7:15, just after the Archers. Now on Radio 4, it's time for Women's Hour with Nuala McGovern.
Hello and welcome to Women's Hour. Great to be back with you this week. And I'm wondering, have you noticed the posters that are popping up with Anne Hathaway and Jessica Chastain for the film Mother's Instinct? Well, they star in this new psychological thriller. It's opening later this week, and we are thrilled to have both of them for you today on the programme. They're going to tell us what it was like to make the film together as best friends, playing best friends, until they weren't. And speaking of friends and support systems, you will no doubt have seen Catherine, Princess of Wales, announce over the weekend that she had a cancer diagnosis. Her brother James posted this on Instagram. He said, "Over the years, we have climbed many mountains together. As a family, we will climb this one with you too." So I want to hear about who you turn to in trying times. When life throws you a curveball, who is on your speed dial? Or the first person or group that you will WhatsApp? Who helped, or do you think would help, with the practicalities of life when you just can't do what needs to be done? Maybe you've had an experience that you were surprised by who was able to show up for you. So to get in touch, you can text the programme. The number is 84844 on social media. We're at BBC Women's Hour, or you can email us through our website. If you'd like to WhatsApp us or send a voice note, that number is 03700 100 444. Also today we have a new series starting, Breaking the Cycle. That's about helping young people at risk. And we have a beautiful book by the Cameroonian writer Mouchi Tedji Xavier, who will be in the Women's Hour studio with me. So that is all coming up. But let us begin with a new BBC study of elite British sportswomen. It shows that many are training and chasing medals for Great Britain while earning surprisingly low wages. The 143 female athletes who responded were above the age of 16, forgive me. They were competing for their country in senior sport or at the highest level in their sport, at top club level. And that same research showed that some had considered giving up sport because of the cost of living now. Well, according to the study, more than 3/4 of the respondents felt that sportswomen are not paid enough compared with sportsmen. Let us turn to Becky Gray, BBC sports journalist who has been working on this study. Let's turn to this, Becky, and welcome to Women's Hour. More than a third of the 143 respondents said they'd considered giving up sport because of the expenses of their life.
Yeah, exactly. And when we look, thanks for having me, first of all, when we look at some of the numbers in this study, it becomes really clear why. So more than 3/4 of those 143 respondents that you mentioned told us they earn less than £30,000 a year from their sport. So the most recent average salary data we have from the Office for National Statistics comes from April 2023, and that average salary was £34,963. So it's just the stark reality of life as an elite British sportswoman, I suppose, that the vast majority of them are earning less than that average salary.
How do they manage?
It's a great question, and it's a question that I have asked many sportswomen over the past few months, and not easily, to be honest. You know, one of the big conversation topics was equipment. A lot of them still have to pay for their own equipment, so it's not just that you're getting paid this small amount to play sport. It's also, you know, it's as if your job came with, you know, a few £1,000 price tag on you know, the laptop you need to work, that kind of thing. For an example I can think of, spoke to a kite foil racer, which is going to be a new sport in this upcoming Olympics this year.
What is it?
That is a great question. It's in the sailing categories.
Okay.
So they sort of, it's a really cool one where they sort of look like they're hovering above the water. I think, and I hope I have got that correct.
And with a kite, by the sounds of it too.
And with a kite, obviously pulling them along. Yeah, and you know, those boards aren't cheap, those kites aren't cheap. She told me she has to get a new kite every 6 months. You can't reuse it, and yeah, that all comes out of this low income that sportswomen are making.
So that's the income that they're having. You talked there about the equipment, which obviously would have an impact on their training. I know I have read previously of some taking second jobs, for example, and I'm beginning to wonder how many hours in the day that they'll really be able to devote to a job if they're supposed to be training.
Exactly, yeah. I think one sportswoman told us she's had up to 5 different jobs at one time to fund her sports career. But then, you know, equally, you said that hours in the day, that is the thing, there's only so many. So we spoke to another sportswoman who earns £16,000 a year from her sport, and she told us, you know, she's aiming for the 2028 Olympics. She can't get a job. She said it would have to be a job working night shifts because of her training schedule. And, you know, elite athletes, sleep is pretty important to them. That's just not going to be workable.
I'd even say for the average person, as well as I'm sure listeners who do night shifts would chime in on that too. What about sponsorship? Because that's often where the big money comes from.
Yes, so when I gave that stat earlier, more than 3/4 said they earn less than £30,000 a year. That does actually, we asked them about their full income from sport, so that includes sponsorship, prize money, things like that, as well as funding or a salary. And anecdotally, what sportswomen told us is there are fewer opportunities for them.
Why?
I'm just going to say sexism. I mean, it's so hard, isn't it? It's such a difficult question. And what the evidence points to is just plain sexism. There are fewer opportunities for women to earn sponsorship. And then, you know, we had one sportswoman perhaps unsurprisingly talk about looks. Like, if you're a woman, your sponsorship might be more likely to be based on the way that you look. But then they also spoke about chances after sport. So, you know, one Olympic athlete told me in their sport, men probably would get some coaching opportunities once they retire. That's not going to be there for the women, so they have to think ahead as well. Like they're potentially going to need a whole career change once they do come out of their sport.
Is there a continued impact of the Lionesses' high-profile Euro 2022 win? Because there it felt like there was the energy and the enthusiasm and a lot of people trying to also be on the coattails of that, many that were not women.
Absolutely, and obviously, so, you know, there were chances for women to fill in comments on this questionnaire anonymously, and the word lionesses came up a lot, as you can imagine. Loads of positivity around that. It's absolutely brilliant, and there is definitely progress in certain areas. So 9 in 10 of these sportswomen told us they think media coverage of women's sport has improved over the last 5 years. Obviously the lionesses are going to be a massive part of that. But I think, you know, the reason that we wanted to do this study is to show that that's not really trickled down yet. I think that's what the results have shown us. That, you know, at the absolute top and the most high profile, we're seeing amazing things, and it absolutely has to be celebrated, but not everywhere yet.
Yeah, I mean, talking about elite sportswomen and also at the top of their game, we had Dame Laura Kenny on the programme, the most successful female Great Britain Olympic athlete in history, and she's announced her retirement from cycling. That was last Monday on Women's Hour, if you missed it, you can listen back. But she talked about the expense of training and having children, because having a family, that's also, I suppose, something, not just time, but money that needs to be considered.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think probably going into this study, it's something that we ourselves hadn't considered. You know, childcare costs for any woman or parent starting a family are always a consideration, and it's absolutely something that came out of this study as well. So we found that more than a third of our respondents don't feel supported by their club or governing body to have a baby and continue to compete. And maybe most interestingly on this childcare issue, 2/3 don't know what their parental leave policy would be with their club or governing body. So yeah, I mean that says it all. If you're not quite sure what your parental leave policy is, probably you wouldn't be sure what your financial situation is. So before you even get into what are the physical implications of giving birth while you're training as an athlete, yeah, there's all these practical considerations.
Perhaps also a bit taboo to even ask. What are the main concerns raised by the athletes? And I know you'll be focusing on different aspects of the research over the week.
Yeah, so some of the main things we've been talking about today on the BBC Sport website are obviously money and maternity, as we just mentioned, social media trolling. So this is something, when we last did the study in 2020, it was one of the key issues that came out, probably unsurprisingly to a lot of people. It's still a major issue in sportswomen's lives, so more than a third have been trolled, and a quarter have received social media abuse of a sexual nature. We've also covered transgender athletes competing in female categories. So more than 100 respondents told us they would be uncomfortable with transgender women competing in female athletes, and many told us of their fear of sharing that opinion publicly. Later in the week we'll be talking about sportswomen's use of the contraceptive pill, disordered eating, and the fact that 2/3 don't feel that their equipment that they use was specifically designed for women. So no shortage of topics.
It's really interesting. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Becky Gray. Becky also has a piece up online. There's lots about this. If you just go to the BBC Sports page, you can read a little more on this study. We'll continue keeping an eye on it across the week. Now, to Mother's Instinct. This is a new film that opens in the UK this week. It stars Academy Award-winning actresses Jessica Chastain and Anne Hathaway. They play best friends raising sons of the same age in the same neighbourhood. This psychological thriller follows their apparently picture-perfect life in 60s suburbia. And in this clip, they, which is Alice and Celine, they're searching for their boys Theo and Max. Theo has a severe nut allergy.
Theo! Theo? Alice? What's going on? Wow, the boys have Max's cookies. Okay, well Theo knows he can't have one. He's 7, he dreams of trying them. Theo! Oh, no more cake for them. Over here!
What's that?
Our secret tunnel. Where are the cookies? Just right there. Did you eat any? No. When I call you, you answer me, okay? Okay? Theo, say yes, Mom, okay? Yes, Mom. Okay.
Did he have any? Did he have any?
No, but just one Coquel.
He knows that.
I'm a terrible mother.
You're a wonderful mother. And a wonderful friend.
Maybe I need a glass of wine.
Might I interest you in something stronger?
Well, I recently had the pleasure of speaking to Jessica and Anne about the film. Also, their friendship in real life became evident from the start of our conversation. And I asked Anne if she would describe the film as a psychological thriller, and also if she was attracted to that genre. I love the film. I watched it last night. A psychological thriller. Would you describe it as that, Anne? Are you attracted to that genre?
Yes, I am, but I'm attracted to many genres. I don't know, I just love cinema, and I love exploring it. And when I see a really good example of a particular type of genre, and I have the opportunity to work with arguably one of the greatest living actresses, it's not really arguable, just one of the greatest living actresses, one of the all-time greats, who happens to be a darling friend. I mean, it was a very quick yes and then a very long process.
Oh my gosh, years, but it has been made, and I just have to let our listeners know that Jessica was kind of elbowing Anne in the ribs there as we chat as well. But you are good friends, and in this particular film, you are best friends living next door to one another until things take a bit of a turn. And I wondered what that was like, playing best friends that then begin to be suspicious, very suspicious of one another. Jessica?
You know, you'd think, listen, because I love Annie. I think she's such an incredible artist and person, and I love her family. I love kind of everything about her. So it's very difficult. It actually sometimes makes it more difficult to play friends who then have conflict in the story and suspicions develop, especially when you care about the person so much. But I think what it does is it gives the film an edge, which, as you mentioned, the psychological thriller really needs. And this film definitely has an edge.
It does
And
have
I
an edge.
lost my voice forever.
I was just thinking it was very husky. It all sounds good. But you play Alice. How would you describe her character? And I have to say, oh my goodness, the glamour and the fashion and the style of this film, as well as its substance. But let's talk about Alice, Jessica.
Oh, thank you. Well, first we just acknowledge Mitchell Travers, who's our costume designer, for putting together those beautiful looks for the characters. And it takes place in the 1960s, so I think that adds to the element of glamour in it. Alice, I mean, she's really a product of that time. She's someone who, when we meet, she really wanted more in her life. She really wants a career. She wants to be more than just a mother, you know. She loves being a mom, but she feels that there's a part of her that is unexpressed and kind of held down. And I think the kind of interesting thing about both these characters, when we find them, they're being repressed in some way, which creates this tsunami of emotions that come out.
That you're waiting on tenterhooks for that explosion. Celine, Anne, tell us about her.
I think that Celine is someone who, Jessica just said it really, really well. I think both of these women are being repressed. And I think Celine has a very delicate equation going on inside of her. And she just thinks, technically, I got so much of what I wanted, so I'm not going to think about the ways that it happened. And so I think that she's, to use a word that I think people are becoming more familiar with, she's very unhealed. I think that she has a very happy layer on top of a lot of turmoil. And so when that top layer is removed and you actually see what she's been dealing with, the pain that she's been living with, and what it makes her do, how it makes her treat the people around her, how it makes her treat herself, it should be shocking. But when you consider a society that doesn't allow a full expression of oneself based on arbitrary factors like gender, maybe it isn't that shocking.
Gosh, when you talk about layers, I'm thinking of one point when you have a black lace mantilla over your face, and I'm trying to see in your eyes what it is that you're trying to get across. It's interesting. That's quite evocative to me as you speak. It's called Mother's Instinct. I was wondering, I mean, it's a controversial term, maternal instinct. Lots of debates about that. Do you believe in it, Jessica?
Absolutely. The most dangerous animal that you come across in the wild is a mother. Like a mother bear, a mother, any animal that is with her cubs, her children. So absolutely, I believe in a mother's instinct.
And you're nodding?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yes, I've experienced it many times myself. Yeah. Where you sort of go from like pleasant to beast very fast, and you're like, oh, well, let's remember that everything's probably going to be okay. So yeah, I believe in instincts. You know, so, and maybe this is just a particular way of identifying one.
Do you think it's different to paternal instinct?
Well, maybe we could just say parental instincts.
Yeah.
May we never see them butt up against each other. May they only work together. But yeah, I think an extreme instinct towards a protective love. And maybe we could just put it that way.
Which then leads to this amazing thriller. How was it to work together as pals?
Well, I want to work with her again. I would love to work with Annie where we don't have an extreme conflict.
Or like we could work in fashion.
But it was, I mean, she's really incredible. She can just switch on a dime. You know, you see these actresses who really kind of have to rev it up for a long time, and she's not like that. I mean, of course it's inside of her, but she's professional, and then once the camera's rolling, she's really able to conjure up this depth of feeling, and I mean, it's why she is the actress she is and celebrated the way that she has been.
And it's not just actors, of course. You're both listed as producers on this film, and Jessica, your female-led production company, Freckle Films, which I have to say, as a redhead, I quite enjoy that name of your company, produced the film. Is it getting easier to get the things made that you want to get made as a woman? Anne, what do you think?
Well, the part that my ear pricked to in that sentence was the things that you want to get made. And I think that it's a whole process in terms of becoming an artist, not just figuring out how you get things made, but what it is you want to see out there and why. I hope it's getting easier. I certainly think that there's more conversation happening. I think that there are certain statistics, numbers that are showing us that, yeah, progress is being made. There's also statistics that show it's not happening quickly enough, and it's not happening enough for everyone in the same way. So I'm always very, very hesitant to celebrate, but I do see more inclusivity in terms of storytelling. I think you just need to look at the Best Picture nominees this year at the Oscars, and there's a much wider variety of stories being told than 10 years ago. So there's a phrase that I really love. It's a Creole phrase, and it's petit à petit l'oiseau fait son nid, and it means little by little the bird builds its nest. And I sort of feel like that's what we're all doing. We're all contributing to it little by little. And hopefully inside of a generation, they won't really know what it is that we're going on about.
We'll have the whole tree maybe with many, many nests. What about it, Jessica? What do you think stands in the way?
Oh, well, I think, with independent cinema too, there's a lot that stands in the way. I think, we just had a pandemic. We're heading back into the theaters. I think we're trying to figure out the model of making films. And with streaming being involved, I think there's a lot of unanswered questions. I do see a difference from when I started in the industry about 12 years ago in terms of women's stories, or stories, about, as Annie says, not just gender variety, but there's just more variety in storytelling. And so we're not coming from one demographic over and over again. So I do see a difference, and I see a difference in terms of more actresses producing, which is really inspiring to me, because those are the markers that young girls notice, and then they realize it's possible. And so yes, little by little we're making our nest.
And I love the fact